So I think one of the greatest things about Apex Legends is that all of the weapons are reasonably well balanced, which means you can choose anything, pick up anything, and if you're good with it, you can do really well. So what I thought I'd do is offer one quick tip for every single weapon in the game. If you use these tips, you're going to be at a much larger advantage over people that don't use these tips. So let's get straight into it. Right, we'll start from here and then go all the way down there. When using the Kraber, it has a very long scope in time, but what you'll notice is if you scope in and then quickly scope in again, it skips that animation. So let's say you've got a player and you're trying to hit them, they're a little bit far away. Instead of doing that long scope animation, you can go like this. So that means you can still strafe at a reasonable speed, but make sure that each time you want to shoot, you're zooming in. It allows you to have a much faster movement speed, because obviously when you're scoping with a sniper, it's really slow. Not many people know that you can do this. The Mastiff has a very strange spread. You need to aim down sight with it. It's a horizontal spread weapon. So as you can see by the crosshair, it goes this way instead of this way or anything like that. So to reduce the spread, ADS, and just consider that because of the way the spread works, you want to be hitting the thickest point of a player's hitbox. So for people like Lifeline and Wraith, that's usually around their thighs. For Pathfinder, right in their body. For everyone else, it's pretty much just center of mass. And then we have this shot. As you can see, the spread is hugely different. So definitely ADS with this weapon. And think about this, right? This is going to shoot somebody. If you do this, this will hit a lot of shots if you hit Lifeline in the thighs. But if you aim for her head, you can hit like 2 bullets. So aim for center of mass always. Next we have the L star. I found the best way to use the L star is to do burst. Spam the fire button 5 times, wait about half a second, then repeat. Another quick tip, as you're shooting, you can actually see the charge going up. You see that blue bar? So you can just make sure that you're not hitting the top of that and it will never overheat. So if you end up doing a burst that's too large, just slow down a little longer for the next shot. Now for the EVA-8, this one should be obvious. It's weird. It's called an EVA-8 Full Auto. It's a full auto weapon. Many people seem to not realize that even after many months of playing. So get a purple belt, hold down the trigger, and it's very effective. Now for the Mozambique, this is the only other shotgun besides the Mastiff that has reduced spread when aiming down sights. So make sure you aim down sights. The Peacekeeper, this is one of the highest damage weapons in the game, but a lot of people struggle to use it effectively. Now, one of the tips I've learnt to be better at this weapon is to aim down sights as well. Not because the spread is reduced, like you can see that the spread is the exact same regardless. However, if you take a look at the crosshair, look at how the spread is a lot smaller than the actual crosshair area. So you may try to hit a target, and what you'll do is you'll hit the side, you'll clip them like here, which means you won't do the full potential damage. But if you ADS, that is not really a problem. You can find it a lot easier to hit the center of the target. For the RA45, now this is an interesting weapon. For me, I don't really like it that much. I feel like there's so many better weapons that are more stable. But for one tip, if you struggle to keep your recoil on target, which is something I do a lot, just kind of spam fire, spam click, or spam press the trigger instead of holding it down. It becomes much easier to hit targets at longer range. For the P2020, I say always put an optic. I mean, you can see how difficult it can be to notice what you're aiming at. Just always make sure you have an optic, and besides that, just understand that this thing can fire really fast. When you consider how much damage this can do, yeah, you're going to knock a lot of players down. With the R301, it got a bit of a nerf, which means its recoil is a little harder to control. But if you do 10 bullet burst, it's basically just pull down. If you have a large mag, that's really easy. Even if you're aiming really far away. or even on a moving target. Obviously these targets are so much easier to hit than a player, but it proves the point. Now if you hold it down, it starts going side to side, which is a little harder to control. So if you struggle, just do 10 bullet bursts. Now for the R99, this is the highest DPS weapon in the game. It is a very, very strong weapon, but to be able to use it effectively, you need to be able to track your targets and hit shots effectively. So one of the things I'd say is you need a good barrel. That makes your life so much easier. But if you don't have a good barrel, you can always just hipfire. It's surprisingly easy to hipfire at quite long distances. I hipfire a lot with this weapon and I find it to be very effective. Obviously as soon as I have like a blue barrel or above, then I will just ADS. Now for the Alternator, this is a weapon that has a lot of power with the disruptor rounds. It's completely shaken up the meta in Season 2, but it's not perfect. The reason for that is the damage per second without the disruptor isn't great. So I'd say instead of holding onto an Alternator hoping you get a disruptor, hold on to the disruptor rounds and then wait for an Alternator, because disruptor rounds are rarer than alternators. You'll see alternators absolutely everywhere, and pretty much every weapon here, over there, is going to have higher DPS than this. Once again, we can share the same tip as the RE45. If you want to shred someone's shields, put it 2 times on this thing and just tap fire at a distance. Instead of trying to hold down fire, which is just really hard to do. The bullets kind of go all over the place. If you just tap fire, it's a lot better. Next, we have the Scout. Now, this is a weapon that has a lot to learn. Like, you can master this thing. I will talk about one thing today in particular, and that is hipfire. The Scout has one of the best hipfire potentials. Let's take a look at how the crosshair works. So when you're moving, it's very far apart. When you're staying still, slightly less. When you're crouching, even less. You kind of want to find a balance between shooting fast and staying still whilst you're shooting. The more still you are, the faster you can shoot. For example, if you're crouching, it's fairly easy to hit targets, but even at this distance it's a little more challenging. So if we slow down a little, we have a much higher accuracy. If we're up close, we can fire faster, of course. But you don't always want to be crouching like that, right? So what about if we move, stop, and then shoot? Move, stop, shoot. Move, stop, shoot. Or we can do 2 shots. Run out of ammo. But you see the point I'm making? Make sure you're staying still when you shoot and move in and out of each bullet, and you'll be really accurate with the Scout at hipfire. The reason you want to hipfire with this thing is when you aim down sights, it has a very slow movement speed. It's a sniper. But when you're hipfiring like this, you have the same movement speed as every other weapon. Next, we have the Wingman. Now, I could talk about this weapon for hours, and I was thinking about doing a more updated Wingman guide. If you'd like to see that, let me know. But the only tip I'll give you today is remember how fast this thing can fire. You know, like this thing can fire very fast, and honestly, I feel like, say, having the fastest fire rate with an 80% accuracy versus a very slow fire rate with 100% accuracy is a lot better. I would love to know what you think about this, but just consider increasing your fire rate to deal more damage and make it harder for the opponents to fight back. Now, the Spitfire has been nerfed a little bit, so it's not as good as it used to be, but now the SMGs can no longer take scopes, and the assault rifles kind of have a bit of a weird recoil. The LMGs have this strange spot in the meta which people don't realize. They are very effective long range. I don't have a scope to show it, but if you had like a 3 times or 2 to 4 times, you'd find that it's very effective. You can pull down at a long range and it's very easy to control. Obviously, with a good barrel and a better scope, it would be even easier. Up next, we have the Longbow. Now, the Longbow, there's a lot to talk about, but I'll be talking about how you can use it up close. So, instead of just trying to ADS like this, you'll be very slow. The best thing you can do to keep yourself a little more agile and have a variable movement speed, which means you're going to be more challenging to hit, is ADS, shoot, ADS, shoot. That way, You're not worrying too much about staying still because you will be an easy target. You can play around cover really easy. The scoping time is really quick when you have like a 1x, a 2x or no optic. Up next we have the Prowler. Now this weapon is very valuable early game when you are in really close range fights and people don't really have armor. I find the best thing you can do is get as close as possible and aim for their shoulders and head. That way you're going to get enough damage to do headshots, because you'll need a couple headshots in there if you want to do 2 bursts to knock a player down. But when you think about it, 2 bursts to knock a player down at the start of the game, that's insanely fast. Next we have the Flatline. This is one of my favorite weapons at the moment. Now there's something I will tell you about the Flatline. It has a higher DPS than the R99 if you hit headshots. So how can you hit more headshots? Well, put a higher magnification scope on it. I cannot show you here, but when you put it 3x, it suddenly becomes a lot easier to hit those closer, more accurate shots, even if you're at a distance like this. I know it sounds crazy, but this is kind of what you want to do. You want to use the Flatline to get headshots. If you're this close and you don't like using a long range scope, use a better weapon. The R99 is going to have higher DPS, the Alternator is going to have higher DPS with a disruptor. There's no point using a Flatline up close. You should have another weapon and have the Flatline as sort of a mid-distance headshot machine. Up next we have the Triple Take. Now I love this weapon. Honestly, it's not a very good sniper, but it has a very interesting spread, which means no matter what you're doing, you're going to hit some shots. It kind of has a similar spread to the Scout in that if you're moving, there's more spread. If you're staying still, less. Crouching, even less. If you jump, there is even more. However, you can jump and shoot. But if you want to jump and shoot and make sure you do the full damage, then there's another little trick. When you ADS, the spread is even less than any other thing I've just talked about, even if you're in the air. So if you want to do crazy shots whilst in the air or whilst moving fast, just ADS. You can do some real crazy stuff with this, like say you're hiding here and there's a player up on the building above you, you can literally just go like that. If you get a headshot, that's like 130 damage. No other weapon has that kind of spread. Obviously the shotguns don't have reduced spread, but they're not going to be very valuable at longer distances. Now the Devotion is a really interesting weapon. I would give you one tip, and that is to get a decent barrel, put a long range scope on it and see how useful it is at longer ranges. Everybody knows how to use a Devotion up close. Yes, it's very strong. You can hip fire with it. I'd say hip fire, it's really accurate. You don't want to waste your movement speed by aiming down sights, because an LMG does make you very slow. Once again though, if you're hip firing, it's the same as every other weapon. But one tip, like I said, put a long range scope and kind of tap fire with it. This thing, in my opinion, can rival the Longbow. If you want to learn more about how to do this, I made a separate video on it because I feel like it's that valuable. Like, people haven't really tried to use it this way. So you do tap fires like this. Now you may think that I'm doing full auto, but I'm not. I am tap firing as fast as I can, and it means the recoil is really small. Honestly, I feel like this works more effectively without the turbocharge. Now, the Havoc is a very high DPS weapon, and I would suggest trying to learn it. All there is to it really is just a slight recoil. I mean, yes, it's got more recoil than other weapons, but it's really not that bad. There isn't really too much to this weapon, honestly, other than, obviously, if you can, get the turbocharger, but if not, you can kind of pre-aim it a bit. But there's kind of a fine line between it, because if you pre-aim too close, they'll hear you fire, and they'll just wait. They'll wait for you to empty your mag. So what you want to try and do is pre-fire and time it so that as soon as you go around the corner, you're shooting. Alright, that's it. One tip for every weapon. Some weapons got kind of a bit of an extra tip thrown in there too. I hope that this video was useful. If you'd like to see a similar video like this, but for the legends or maybe the areas on the map, let me know. I'd love to see your thoughts and feedback. I'll see you in the comments. Cheerio!